Welcome to Pints and Politics. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. As you know, each episode we bring together thought leaders and people in the community who have important topics to talk about in our state. And we also do it while enjoying a craft beer. And so let me introduce our guests for this afternoon, or evening, depending on how you're. Lynne Schuller is the Executive Vice President of the Nebraska Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association.
It's a mouthful,
Lynne,
isn't it?
That is, and so the acronym is?
Nebraska HBPA, or Nebraska Horsemen, is how
Perfect, and which is a nonprofit Nebraska corporation operating on behalf of thoroughbred racing here in Nebraska. And one of the questions, Lynne, and trainers and backstretch personnel throughout the state of Nebraska. What is a backstretch?
Backstretch personnel are the people that are all actually hands-on with the animals. So
okay.
They're the ones that feed them, exercise them, make sure that they've got fresh hay and straw and everything that goes into successfully raising and taking care of a horse.
I thought backstretch personnel was chiropractors, but okay.
It's different setting.
Very different. But a lot of those workers could probably use a chiropractor.
That is correct.
At the end of the day.
Yes, most of them.
Yeah. And then I'm pleased to welcome Lance Morgan, who's the president and CEO of Ho-Chunk Inc. And Lance, as we were saying before we started tonight, I know our paths have crossed through the years, but I think this is the first time I've had the pleasure of saying hi. So
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. So Ho-Chunk Inc. is the award-winning economic development corporation owned by the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska.
We've gave ourselves several of those awards, so I wouldn't put too much stock into them.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Well, it is
That's
amazing.
not true.
It's amazing the work that you've done through the years, and I'm really excited to talk about gambling tonight. And so you've joined forces, and after several attempts through the years, and I want to talk about some of those, there's now a petition effort underway that you are championing to offer to the voters of Nebraska this coming fall the opportunity to expand gambling here in our state. So please give me a little bit of history of, well, before we do the history, tell me, assuming that we get the signatures and assuming that it goes on the ballot and people vote to approve this measure, what would change in Nebraska?
The main thing that would change is that casino gaming would be authorized at any licensed racetrack in the state, very simply. So that could mean putting in slot machines, that could mean building a luxury type casino with affiliated amenities. It could run the gamut from those options. The main limitation would be it must be at a licensed racetrack to be able to do it.
And Lance, I understand that many of our bordering states have the opportunity to do similar operations, and so that money is bleeding across the border. What are some of those other states, and what are some of those figures of the money that we're missing out on here in Nebraska?
Well, every state that touches Nebraska has some form, some bigger, some other, of casino gaming. Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and South Dakota. My least favorite's Iowa at the moment. I'm a Nebraska grad. And
Absolutely.
But it's about $400 to $500 million. And the Winnebago tribe itself, where I work with, we are very familiar with Iowa gaming because we have a gaming operation there. And they were looking to expand their casinos, number of casinos in the state of Iowa a few years ago, and they commissioned a study. And the whole point of their study was, where can we put a casino to suck money out of other states?
Yeah.
And so they'd already put 3 in Council Bluffs and 1 in Sioux City, and they put it up by Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so Iowa is doing this very purposely, and the various states around us are probably taking $400 to $500 million a year out of the state from Nebraskans that's going elsewhere, and that's not even counting Las Vegas and people flying out there to game.
Nor is it counting, now that Iowa has the sports betting on sports teams. And so there has been several efforts through the years. It may be painful to go through some of those, but I understand that 2004, 2006, 2014, and 2016, now there were different circumstances. Some of those, at least one of those, didn't even make it onto the ballot because of a legal battle in the courts. What's different this time, in your opinion, of why this can be successful and it hasn't been in past years? In the state?
Those have failed in the past for a lot of different reasons, and I think that there's always been pretty strong support for gaming this entire time. But we've spent a lot of money on this, and we're not just shooting in the dark. You know, we did some polling in 2016 that showed 58, 59% of the people generally supported expanded gaming. And then what we've done lately is up in the 60% right now. And so we're pretty confident if it gets on the ballot that it'll pass. I think what's different lately, especially in our polling that's changing it, is the sports betting.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who maybe would never go to a casino, even if they thought of it as entertainment, have been going there to bet on their favorite team or the big game or something like that. And anecdotally, I was just standing in line, and there's about an hour to make the bet, and everybody in line was pretty much wearing Husker stuff. and
Yeah.
so a lot of people are realizing what everybody already knows, and it just becomes more obvious, and there's more people exposed to it, that most of the cars in the parking lot in Council Bluffs, Iowa, are from Nebraska.
It was no accident that when they had the grand opening for sports betting, that their featured star was a former Nebraska Cornhusker.
Yes.
That's
So-
no
So
accident.
I think I think there's generally been growing support, especially with concern about property taxes and tax relief and that sort of thing. But as more people have gone and experienced sports betting, they're thinking, how is this legal here? Why not?
Yeah, what am I missing out on? Lynne, I'm interested from your organization's perspective. There's been a love of horse racing in the state for many, many years.
Many, as a matter of fact.
Was, a fixture, a worldwide fixture of horse racing just up the street in Omaha.
A little known fact is that the first state to authorize horse racing in the nation was Nebraska.
I did not know that.
Before Kentucky, before anybody. We were the first.
We were the Wild West.
Yes. And we
And
have
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we have fallen behind ever
Yeah,
since.
yeah.
I'm sure that you remember Exarban in its heyday. It was very common for them to have 30,000 people in the stands on the weekend. There were charter buses that came up from Kansas City and the surrounding areas. They had qualifying races for the Kentucky Derby. They were one of the top 10 tracks in the country.
They ran about 180 days a year, and now they run just a handful. And it's really, the whole horse racing industry is on a pilot light. And one of the things that I really like about what we're doing is that a lot of the money that comes into the gaming operation will go into the purses to support expanded horse racing. And so it's not just an urban entertainment activity.
Right.
That money will also create a stimulus for rural Nebraska. People got to raise these horses, they got to feed them, and they got to train them. And so there's going to be a little something of economic activity for everybody in this deal.
Well, and that's what I'm hearing too. I mean, there's just such a historical, being a rural state with agriculture, I mean, we have a love of that industry. And so tell me, and you probably told me this earlier, but tell me once again, so if this measure passes, what does that mean for, what would happen? What would be one of the first things that would happen in Nebraska, the opportunity to expand gambling?
Well, the key is all three measures have to pass. There's a constitutional amendment, and then there are two proposed statutes. So there would be enacting legislation, and then there's a taxation statute as well to very clearly lay out how this money would be spent and how it would be collected, what percentage is collected.
And what are, not to put you on the spot, what are some of those measures that would be funded then through?
Well, 75% of it would go to the state, 25% of it goes to either the county or the municipality where those locations are. The money for the state has to go into a tax fund Now it's up to them how they
It's up
how
to
they
the
want to do
legislature?
it. Yes, it's up to the legislature how they want to utilize that money. And I think, you know, you've been involved in politics for a very long time. The problem with earmarking money with these types of
Correct.
measures is that, let's say for the sake of argument that you want it very specifically to go to K through 12 education, for example. Well, it's very easy for the legislature to say, fine, we'll spend the money on that, but then they just gut the money that was already going to that item and spend it somewhere else. I mean, it's very easy.
We you know, if we get too specific, it's going to create legal challenges to it. It'll
absolutely.
really complicate it. So we're hoping that, frankly, the money goes towards property tax relief.
There seems to be some initiative to do that.
Well, and there's a very strong desire for them to do something. And I give them full credit. There are several measures out there right now to try and reduce property taxes, as you know. Unfortunately, every single one of those plans is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah, there's no new revenue.
There's no new revenue. This is new revenue.
This isn't, it's interesting, it's not even new revenue, it's just shifting revenue
Right.
from Iowa to Nebraska.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
It's really strange, and I know the governor has come out pretty strong against expanded gaming, and he's super in favor of property tax relief.
Yes.
And I mean, it seems to me that this is an obvious way to help solve that problem.
Year after year after year, the property tax issue is not going away. And year after year after year, the legislature continues to tackle that, one governor after the next. And until we can come to some type of an agreement where we bring new revenue into this equation, it's just not, we're just, as you said, we're just rearranging the seats on the
If you're a
Titanic.
farmer in Nebraska right now, they're cutting your throat with property taxes. It's just not
I
sustainable.
think the last 10 years or so, I live in a rural area, and the property taxes are up about 150%. And it really, you know, if corn prices were up 150%, I think it'd be okay.
Yes.
But none of that's happened. And so it's already a difficult business, and it's already tough for rural Nebraskans. And it really puts a crimp on it. And so not only could this do property tax relief, but it also create a market and an additional industry in the areas, in the rural areas, to diversify it. And it's a bigger deal than you think, and it'll have a larger stimulus than you think. It's not just for the larger cities, it's for everybody, I think.
Where will the opposition come from? You've done this before. Where will the opposition come from?
I think the governor
Yes.
is definitely against it. My standard line for that is, I've lost way more money in my TD Ameritrade account than I ever did at a casino.
Also a form of gambling, yes.
Yes, and that's the largest gambling operation in the state.
Yes.
And I think religious groups sometimes.
Yeah.
And I was on a TV show 15 years ago, and there was a pastor of some sort.
Were you in high school then,
No,
Lance? Or?
I'm 51. And he was talking about anti-gambling, and I said, we were talking about the context of tribal gaming, and he was telling us we shouldn't do it, and I had made the comment that I did not learn to gamble on the reservation, I learned in the church basement.
Exactly.
And so I said, I don't know if you represent a higher moral authority or a competitive interest. And it's really strange when you peel it back, that there's a lot of people trying to protect their own interests in this thing. And what we're talking about is a voluntary recreational activity for people to go to or not go to. There is no requirement that you go to these gaming options. So.
Again, Pints and Politics with Dan Parsons, my guests Lynne Schuller and Lance Morgan. We're talking about expanded gambling in the state of Nebraska. But we neglected to toast because I love having my guests on. I love talking about the important issues in the state of Nebraska. But one of the traditions is we do that while enjoying an adult beverage. And tonight we're enjoying from White Elm Brewing Company right here in Lincoln, Nebraska, Skinny Legs. So you both have Skinny Legs, mine are whatever they are. But it's an Indian Pale Ale and it's darn good. So
You have no idea how funny that is, because it's Indian, but
right,
Indians
yes.
are known for being, have skinny legs, and it's an Indian pale ale. So you can find an Indian guy who's really big on top of with little skinny legs.
I didn't plan it that way.
Yeah,
so cheers. Thanks.
We'll take
for,
it as a compliment.
That's right.
Pale ale. That's usually not our color, but
there's so many things there. But well, Lance, talk about, if you would, what this measure would mean to the Winnebago tribe here in Nebraska.
Well, we own one of the tracks in South Sioux City, and we've owned it for 7 or 8 years, and so that would be a boost to the area. The state of Iowa, the tribe has a modest casino in Sloan, Iowa. The river sort of shifted and left some of our
and that
land
was
there.
the first one.
One of Vegas,
Yes.
yes. And then Iowa built a monster casino close, right in the middle of the city, and it's really knocked it down about 80% from
Wow.
where it used to be. We've laid off a lot of people, those kind of things, and so we own this track. And originally bought it sort of as an insurance policy, but if we can develop it, it would really help kickstart. And that's the primary revenue source for our tribal government and our tribal social programs and some of our community development programs. And so that alone would have a huge impact on our community. And then we've partnered with the Horsemen, and that could be very successful, and that will just lead to more development and investment. You don't know this, but Ho-Chunk Inc. is a locally owned
Right.
tribal corporation
Right.
that's really started with no revenue and has a few $100 million a year, and all of our money gets reinvested right back into our community and state of Nebraska and in the surrounding region.
Helping people who are underserved, and I mean, it's a wonderful cause. I appreciate what you've done through the years, and it's and we'll.
So there's nobody that's gonna get rich off this. If you were to come to the reservation 20 years ago, you'd have saw a lot of poverty. And what you'll see now is we've built an entire town from a cornfield,
Wow.
and we're doubling the size of it right as we speak. And so we're trying to figure out a way to really help some of the poorest people in this state, to help develop the economy and give them opportunities they didn't have. And one of the criticisms that really sort of bugs me is that somehow some rich people are going to make all this money. And I never thought of the Indian tribes as the rich people before, but that's a new one on us.
Yeah, exactly. Lynne, talk about, because I know you're involved from a political perspective, what happens in the legislature and some of the political movements in the state. So, first of all, just talk about the process. So you're collecting signatures.
Collecting signatures as we speak. We've been collecting for quite some time.
And paid or volunteers or both?
Paid. We have a consultant who's taking care of that. I think that you know that a lot of initiative petitions, when they use volunteers, they don't get very far.
Yeah, those days have long passed in Nebraska,
Yes.
especially with the continued rise of how many signatures we need to
Well,
have.
not only that, but we're one of the only states that also has a geographic requirement.
Correct.
Where you have to collect a certain percentage from a minimum number of counties. That's extremely difficult to do unless you have an organized contingent that can do that. So we're collecting signatures right now. The deadline to submit signatures, the required number, is in early July. So we're anticipating turning in, right before that time. And then, barring any legal challenges, then it goes on to the ballot. And we go from there.
And you've experienced those legal challenges in years past, but
Every time.
I'm thinking maybe at this point that is moot,
Well,
or
no, they'll
not necessarily.
There's likely to be one.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a free bite at the apple.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So we'll turn in the signatures. I don't think we're going to have trouble having the proper number of signatures. Somebody will challenge it in some way, but there's a limited way there's a limited
Correct.
things that you can challenge
Right.
at that level. But it seems like somebody always finds enough money to challenge it, and so we're anticipating that. And a lot of legal thought and effort have gone into how we craft the questions and how we design them, because if you get killed enough times,
You learn.
Yeah, and so. It's a complicated process.
It is.
And sometimes, we've dealt with the government a lot
Yep.
over the years, and we haven't had a great experience. And if the government wants to get you, they can.
Yep.
And what I'm hoping is that that's not the case in this instance.
So what are the salient points that the public will hear? Because again, I've done a few of these through the years myself and as a consultant. And so stage 1, get the signatures. Stage 2, qualify for the ballot. And then the campaign begins, right? And the traditional means of educating and informing Nebraska voters from that summer start date until the November election. It's a presidential election. Senate race in Nebraska, the 3 congressional races in Nebraska. There's a lot of things on the ballot. Do those help, hurt? What are those dynamics?
It makes it very expensive to compete for airtime on this.
But it does help turnout.
Correct. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of voters.
Correct. We are very fortunate to be working with Ho Chunk, not just because they're a great partner, but they are fully integrated and they have many, many divisions, including a marketing division.
Yeah.
So I've been meeting weekly with their marketing team to craft a plan of information so that we can get accurate information out to the voters as quickly and as accurately as we can. I think our main message will be our name, keep the money in Nebraska.
Yeah.
We have an economic study that's underway right now by a top guy.
Ernie Goss.
Well,
not Ernie.
Not Ernie this time.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
I've worked with Ernie through the years. He's great.
Ernie has
And
done
you-
economic studies for us before, but not on this one. It's been interesting. We've had trouble getting a Nebraska economist to take on this issue because they're worried about maybe political implications. So I have a good friend who's great at this, and he's helping us.
Good.
And we're going to have a lot of the information from that is going to drive some of the marketing. My idea was to put a billboard with a number on it. Was you come back from the casinos in Iowa saying how much you've lost. And it's
Just
been
have it,
about-
keep it rolling.
It's been
Yes.
about $8 billion that Nebraskans have lost in Iowa.
Wow.
And if you could figure out how to keep that number going, similar to what you've seen on the national debt clock.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I think that might be worth it all by itself.
Well, truly, I think this could be the year that people maybe change their attitude at the ballot box about expanding gambling, because the frustrations with property taxes, the frustrations with how do we continue to struggle with property taxes and how do we fund our local schools, and the fact that this. Anyway,
I think I go around asking people. We're spending a lot of money on this issue, so I ask the question, and people who you would think would not be in favor of it, and their most common phrase is, "I think it's time," or "It's about time we do that. I think we're ready," that sort of thing. And I think it's a combination of the sports gambling and people getting that exposure, and other people tired of paying these taxes. And if it didn't reduce it, maybe it'll stop it from going up year after year after year, and you get so many hollow promises from politicians about what they're going to do, and it just doesn't happen. And we still want all these services, but we don't want to pay for it. And I don't know why we take the money back from Iowa and put it back into Nebraska, invest in ourselves.
Right.
And they're doing it for, we don't want the social issues is one of the arguments, but there's not great evidence on that. People will quote stuff that just seems made up to me. And aren't our people already partaking in it?
right.
So it's just absolutely silly that we don't take the revenue and bring it back into our own state.
And I think they're overall just changing attitudes about gaming in general. In 2004, we did polling, and we were at around 52, 53% in '04, and it's just climbed since then. I remember in the early 90s when the state lottery was authorized. That was a game changer.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that was, yeah.
Everybody's heart stopped, and
Yeah.
everybody was going to be furiously scratching lotto tickets in the corner somewhere, and
Nobody died from the
Nobody
Yeah.
died.
Right.
Grandma was still able to get her meds.
there have been hundreds of millions of dollars raised for the Nebraska
Yes.
Environmental Trust,
Right.
for the Education Innovation Fund, and now for the State Fair.
Yeah.
And so I think people see, okay, this is something that can be entertainment, but can also benefit the state as a whole.
Yeah.
And I really think that people are just changing their attitudes in general about gaming.
I've seen some lottery scratch tickets in stocking stuffers for Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Oh, believe me, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen little kids do them, and they think it's great fun. I said, you can't be doing that. But I mean, it's reached a point where you can give it as a Christmas gift to a kid. I mean, so I think that the whole anti-argument, no one's buying it anymore.
Well, and we haven't, again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it seems to me that those predictions of dire economic calamity have not come true.
There are a very small handful of people that have a problem.
Let's face it, yes. And
The
there's
issue
a
with that is
If they have a car, they can go to Iowa, though.
most of the people who have that problem, particularly in the Council Bluffs casinos, are Nebraska residents. And we did an experiment in '04. We called the 800 number, Compulsive Gamblers Hotline, and said, "Hi, I have a compulsive gambling problem. I need assistance." And they said, "Okay, where do you live?" And we said, "Omaha or Bloomfield." And they said, "If you're not an Iowa resident, we can't help you," and hung up.
Yeah.
So if Nebraska residents already have that problem, they are receiving absolutely no financial help whatsoever. It's specifically written into our petition
It's also worse.
that help's going to be offered.
It's also worse than that. The Iowa gaming operations, they give money to a nonprofit. And that nonprofit is highly restrictive in who they can give money out to. And so each casino gives money to, I think it's the Western Iowa thing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In Sioux City, it's called the Missouri Historical something or other. And that money, we asked for some of that money for Nebraska. They wouldn't give it to us.
Sure.
Same thing. So Omaha provides 90% of the money and gets nothing back, which is why if you go to Council Bluffs, you probably see interesting statues and artworks. They have the world's greatest library. It looks like Frank Lloyd Wright designed it, and I don't think Council Bluffs is known for reading, but thank you, Omaha, right?
Exactly.
You can go to their sports facilities. You can go to everything, and it's all paid for by Nebraskans, and it really is ridiculous. Iowa targets Nebraskans. They actually do that in economic studies. They take our money, and they don't share. They don't share in any of it back, and it's absolutely silly. And the more people know about it, I think that's going to be the more they will support the idea of doing it. Whether they support gaming or not, I think that they're going to support just the idea of we should keep that money here in Nebraska. Hence our name.
Keep the money in Nebraska. So let me make sure I give you an opportunity to let people know how they can help and get involved. So Keep the Money in Nebraska is for your website. You're on Facebook, you're on Twitter,
Yes.
and we can link all that to the episode,
Great.
and we will do that. How else can people get involved other than, is that the best way for people to get involved?
If you're interested in seeing this on the ballot, please sign the petition if you see a person out collecting. And in November, don't forget to vote for all three.
Yeah, you won't see many people out until it warms up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because of the nature of it, it's pretty cold in Nebraska.
Yeah.
But our efforts will kick up again relatively soon once it warms up a little bit. And so support for it, vote for it. Just be open to the idea.
And you can sign up to get updates both through your
Absolutely.
Facebook page and your website.
I think
Yes.
the people I've met who are against gaming are certainly against property taxes. So they don't have
You
to
think?
go.
Yeah.
They don't have to go to the casino. Other people can go. Maybe we can bring some Iowans over here and let the people who choose to do that lower their property taxes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even if you're against it, you probably should support it, I suspect.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on the show.
Thanks, Dan. We really
Yeah,
appreciate
very
it.
much. And so let me thank a few people. Let me thank producer Steve Van Hoosen. Steve, thanks for your great work. Kathy Plunkett from Kathy Plunkett Photography. You'll see some of her beautiful photographs. Because not that we need to make you even more beautiful, because you're so photogenic.
Thank you.
And I am in public relations, so that's how I get away with that. Kim Remington, who's the operations manager at Parsons Public Relations. Pints and Politics theme music is by Jack Rodenberg, so you can jam out on that. I want to thank Fuse Co-working for this beautiful space, which is home to Parsons Public Relations, my day job, and our guests, Lynne Schuller, Lance Morgan. Thanks for being on the program, and you can catch a fresh Pints and Politics. I think our schedule is the fourth Friday of the month. You can find us on pintspolitics.com, iTunes, Stitcher, all of your favorite podcast platforms. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And so let's just cheer one more time to Skinny Legs, Lance.
All right. Indian Pale Ale, that's not
Cheers.
my
Thank
favorite.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.